Hey, Deliberate Leaders. I am your host, Allison Dunn, executive coach, owner of Deliberate Directions, and founder of Deliberate Leaders podcast, where we focus on bringing you inspiring interviews to help you on your leadership journey. And today I'm super excited to introduce our guest. She is Eileen McDargh. She is the author of Your Resiliency GPS. She is also the founder and CEO of the Resiliency Group, where she's a keynote speaker, she's a facilitator, and also an executive coach. Her newest book, Burnout to Breakthrough, will be published this coming August. Eileen, welcome to Deliberate Leaders. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you, and I'm delighted we get to do this. This is all important stuff.
Fantastic, and what good timing for it all. Wouldn't you agree?
Sadly, yes. It's great timing.
Yeah. I'm hoping that we can kick off this segment as a little self-serving for myself, but I have 3 questions that I'd like to ask you, and it's part of a research project that I'm working on. So if that's okay with you, are you good to move forward with that? Excellent.
Go for it.
Eileen, what is your top leadership tip?
Well, let me put it this way. Everything is in context. Without context, everything's meaningless. Given what is going on right now, and I'm assuming this is going to be playing within the next week or two, my top leadership, while we are being presented with the physical distancing, with all of the anxiety and fear, my top leadership tip right now is for leaders to become transparent, visible, and vocal. And when I say transparent, we are really looking for leaders who tell it like it is, not who make up some kind of story. We want leaders who are honest with us. And I think one of the things that happens when we are faced with crisis is it rips away the mask and it lets people know who you really are. So I would say as a leader, who are you really showing up? So visible and vocal. Now, visible, you're going to say, well, Eileen, I can't. We're visible right now. And let me tell you, there's something very intimate about being visible in the way in which we are visible. You're beginning to see part of my natural world. You're not seeing the office. You're not seeing the awards, this, whatever. We are now in a really intimate place. So being visible in this way and vocal means willing to speak the truth. And also, when I say speak, I think we need to acknowledge each other for being where we are right now. And it also means that a leader knows how to express empathy and gratitude. Gratitude is a big deal. And part of gratitude is the compassion that it takes for knowing you're staying home right now and you got 3 kids running around screaming at you. Or you can't go out on the golf course. You can't. Though certainly exercise is part of it. So I think that's transparent, visible, and vocal would be, so it's not one tip, it's really a combination.
Yeah, I love that. And I told you I was going to ask you 3 questions, but you answered all 3 of them very eloquently. So you answered, why is it important, especially right now? And then how do you implement it best? By being transparent. That's fantastic. I love that. Thank you. So let's talk about resiliency and your book, Your Resiliency GPS. Is that correct? Is that the name of the book? Yes.
Correct. That's the current one. Okay. And GPS stands for Your Growth Potential Strategy. And I wrote that, I guess about 2 years ago. I've lost track. But yes, because I think your growth potential strategy, just like you have a GPS on your car, you can't tell that Siri or whoever you want to talk to take you to XYZ unless Siri knows where you are right now. And so your growth potential strategy is, where do you find yourself now? And then where is it that you choose to go? So that's part of this whole journey, this resiliency journey.
So what would you say resilience means to you?
I have a very different notion of resiliency. I disagree with the dictionary definition. If you were to pick up the dictionary definition, it would say something along the lines of, and I will paraphrase, That an object, when it is compressed under stress and the stress is gone, it goes back to its original position. So if I were to ask a group, if I were lecturing and I said, tell me what resiliency means, without a doubt, they would say, bounce back. That's great if you're a willow tree or if you're a piece of steel. But for the human system, there's no such thing as going back. To me, resilience is about growth. It's about growing through challenge or opportunity so that you end up wiser, smarter, and or stronger as you go through. If there's no growth, if you're stuck, we're not being resilient. And notice I also said it's opportunity, because I think at the end of the day, resiliency is basically about energy management. Do I have the mental, emotional, physical hardiness to keep on what gives me energy? And that's what we want to grow. I want to grow that energy dimension, or what is depleting it. And when my energy is depleted, it's very hard. I'm not being resilient. I'm shrinking back down. So you'll see that's quite different than what good old Webster told us it was.
Yes, I like yours a lot. I would concur that it's not just bounce back. It is, you definitely don't always return to the same state you were in before, right?
You know, we never are. If you think about this, there's a saying, you cannot enter the same river twice. The water has moved on. When I hear people saying, well, we're going to go back to a new normal, the world is going to be constantly shifting. Our lives are going to be constantly changing. So this notion of resiliency isn't a one-time deal, like, holy crap, now what do I do? It's something that I work on it on a daily basis. And there are days in our life in which we're going to need more energy because of what's going on, and other days in which, you know, it's gentle. But I begin to look at this as a life skill, not a one-time shot skill.
Yeah, I would agree. In your book, you offer recalculating questions to help people kind of revive and renew, to get hope and optimism back. And can you give us a couple of examples for my listeners?
Of recalculating questions?
Yeah.
Okay. So first off, obviously, recalculating questions makes me sound like Siri. You know, when she goes to get, hey, recalculating, change your direction. You know, no, recalculating. So to me, I had to have fun with it anyway, which, by the way, laughter and fun is essential to being resilient. I think that's one of the things we're seeing right now in the middle of this whole pandemic. We're seeing some of the craziest things that make us laugh, because that is a resiliency skill. So recalculating questions basically ask you to think again about where you find yourself and where you want to go. So let me think of a recalculating question. So let's say that right now you might be sitting at home and you're in your quote home office. And a recalculating question would be, as you go through what normally would be your daily routine, if you have a routine, and by the way, that right now is very important to have a routine. It's that routine that allows us to feel kind of anchored. So one question would be, what you're doing right now, is it offering value to you, to your organization, if you're working for it? And what would make it, what would you shift that would add more value? The reason I ask this is that I think in my book coming out this summer, Burnout to Breakthrough, I wrote it because the World Health Organization last May declared burnout a global occupational hazard. Well, all of this craziness that's going on, now all of a sudden we have a space. And I think in this space, we actually have an opportunity to recalculate when I was back there, what was I doing? What am I doing now? And does it have value? There is so much that goes on in our organizations, in our lives, that doesn't have value, but it's because it's, well, the way we've always done it. Well, of course I always wrote a 30-page report every month. Well, why? And who reads it? Who knew? By the way, I found that out in one organization. This person spent all this time doing all this stuff, and then I said, who reads it? And they couldn't figure out anybody who even read it. So your energy is consumed doing something that you don't need to do. So a potential recalculating question would be exactly that. What am I doing? Why am I doing? Does it add value at the end of the day to me or whomever, if perchance I'm still employed, to whoever I'm supposed to add value to? And if I'm going to recalculate, how would I shift? Where would I go? What would I do?
I would imagine more so than ever, we've had a lot of breakthroughs through this transition and figuring out maybe what we don't need to do any longer and what we could do better is going to be, I think, a very innovative time for our world. Or is my
I agree with you. It's actually an emerging initiative. And when I say emerging, let me give you an example of emerging. It's where you think you're going along in one pattern and then something new comes in and it changes your thinking. And you go, oh, what's emerging now? For example, the makers of the cold medicine that we call NyQuil initially started out just as a regular cold medicine. And what they discovered was it put people to sleep. So when it put people to sleep, they said, you know what? This is a new emerging thing. Why don't we call it NyQuil? And it will let you sleep through the night. So they took this is the way we're normally going. This is what we said our drug is supposed to do, our medicine's supposed to do. And then all of a sudden something shifted. So I think you're quite right, is that we're going to see some significant shifts of how we work, of the way we work, where we work. And if we're really smart, we'll find ourselves in a better place, but it will take time.
Do you think resiliency is a skill you can build?
Great question. Because there are some people that say, well, it's genetic. So-and-so is Brazilian. He was born that way. But we know that about 20 years worth of research that says there are some people who appear to be more resilient than others. And what it is that the synapses in their brain that begins to create patterns goes faster. And so they can find alternative ways of responding and they do it quicker. But we now know in the area of brain research, this thing called neuroplasticity, where we didn't stop learning at age 4 and that was the end. Our brains are constantly making new patterns. So when you think of this as a skill, what are new patterns that I can begin saying in my head, that begin to give me a more powerful way of responding to a given situation? And when I begin to tap into that, I'm building that resiliency muscle. And I actually like the idea of muscle, because if you think about it, when you go to the gym for the first time, you're not going to be standing over there lifting up 50-pound weights. You might start with 5 pounds and then you build up and maybe it's 10, maybe it's 15. Well, resiliency is something that we work on. And so you realize that very deliberately, I have to practice this. And let me give you one very powerful way, I think, to begin to retrain our brain to be resilient. And it's to listen to the language we use. Language is incredibly important. That's why when somebody says, this person is an alien versus this person is a migrant, those are two different words. Mark Twain said the difference between the right word and the wrong word was the difference between lightning and lightning bug. So here's the word and this is one for myself that we teach what we need to learn. It's to substitute the word choose to for have to. See, think about this. You didn't have to do this podcast. You have chosen to do this podcast. I didn't have to be on it. I chose to do it. Well, as soon as I say I choose, that means I'm in command. I am choosing to be physically distanced. I am choosing to wear a mask when I go out. I am choosing not to go out a lot, which means there are people who are unchoosing it. I'm not sure that's wise, but in any event, if I say I choose to do this, that means I'm also responsible for those choices because I've made them.
I often use the word versus of have to, I get to, but I,
No,
but there is a really interesting element about choosing it. So I get to is a choice, but it's actually like of multiple things. This is the one I've chosen. So I like that. I love that little shift in my thinking with that statement.
I tell you, I got this clearly when my youngest daughter was going out to babysit for the first time. And she's walking out the door and she says, "Oh, I have to go babysit." I said, "No, you don't. You're choosing to go babysit." "No, I have to go. I told them I would." I said, "Oh, you are choosing to keep your promise?" Well, well, I want the money. I go, "Oh, so you're choosing to go." Well, there's this, you can tell how old this was. There's a CD I want. This is back before you had you go to the app and download something from iTunes. And so you can hear that semantic battle back and forth. About a week or so later, we're at the dining room table, and I said, "Oh, I have to go to New York on Friday." "No, you don't, Mom. Call and cancel. You're choosing to." She got me. Kids will keep you honest. She got me. She got me. She was right. I was choosing.
I love it. That's fantastic. When we look at kind of building that resilience, right? The idea of choosing.
Mhm.
What can leaders do, or is there anything leaders can do to help build resiliency in their teams?
Oh, that's another good question. Um, okay. The first resiliency skill to me is always adaptability, finding multiple ways to respond to any given situation. So I think that for a leader, whatever is the event, the product, the service, whatever you're going to put out, is to invite in the collective, the team, to say, how many ways might we do this differently? What would give us the greatest value here? And what oftentimes team members might be afraid to speak up because it's a legacy system. It's something, it's near and dear to this leader's heart, and we dare not say, "Oh, this is not a good idea at all." So back again, I'm going to being transparent, verbal and visual. And I think to invite multitude pieces of input to allow people to feel that they were heard, and who knows, to come up with a different way of doing things. What you've done is you've created a pattern. The other thing I think that leaders can do is to express intelligent optimism. Intelligent optimism is where you take what's going on and you reframe it in another way that says what's possible versus what's impossible. So one of the best examples to me, because it was just so powerful, was Apollo 13. And I'm sure many people have at least seen the movie of Apollo 13, which is where they could not get the spaceship back. Anything that could go wrong was going wrong. More disaster happened to that spaceship. And Gene Kranz, who was the head of mission control in Houston, the engineers were coming in and said, "We're trying this, we're trying this." And finally, he said, wait, there's nothing else. There's nothing else we can do. We're never going to get them back. And Gene Kranz looked at them and said, "And this might be our finest hour. We're going to try something different." And by refocusing them, by reframing it, instead of saying horrible, terrible, this could be our finest hour, we're keeping at it. We're not letting this go. So I think that's another role of a leader, is to reframe. I'm really thinking that it's an article I think I'd like to write, is the upside of the downside, because I think now we're, again, like you and I said, we've got some possibilities here. If we can look at this instead of going back to the way we've always done it, we want to go back. How do we go forward? Make sense?
That makes perfect sense. Yeah, and those are fantastic example scenarios to build that resilience and being open. Like especially as a leader, stepping forward and saying, "It's not my legacy project. I want to improve," and making that known to your team members. Can we talk a moment about multitasking?
Sure.
So you say that multitasking is ineffective, and I 100% agree with you. And I know that research supports that. What do we need to train ourselves to do so that we can break that tendency?
All right, well, there's a couple very practical things. For example, you stop that little ding that tells you you've got email, which unfortunately I didn't do it. And you might pick that up in the audio. I apologize if that's there. I'm not paying any attention to it all. I should have cut that thing off. So, because what that does is when our attention goes someplace else, it takes us long to get back. And I can be very much single-minded, focused on you. But get rid of that ding. Create a space for yourself, a space that is as sacred as going into a church. And so, for example, if I'm working on a project, I might say, I am not to be interrupted for the next 20 minutes, period, end of sentence. If you were in an office, you could probably put busy, don't bother me. I mean, you literally can create that space. And sometimes on just a fun way, but I know one mother who said that what she tells her children, when I come home from work, do not talk to me until I've had a shower. She created a space for herself because she knew that if she could get that shower, okay, anything that happened today, and then I can
wash it away.
Be present with the family. Yep, if I can wash it away. So the multitasking we really do to ourselves, and we allow other people to do that too. You know, we let people intrude on that space. And there might be times in which it's an emergency. You need to do that. But to be that single-minded focus. Cal Newport, who is he's a professor at Georgetown, has written a wonderful book called Digital Minimalism. And it's really all about how do we get rid of all the digital stuff that pulls to us. And what we have is what he calls deep focus. And deep focus is where you carve out that time. And it is the single one thing that you work on, whether it's the project, the thing you're trying to build, whatever it is, this is your single focus. And part of it is to get rid of, and what he says is on your phone, get rid of all the social media on your phone, because you're going to end up looking at it. And when you end up looking at it, guess what? You just got pulled away from what it was that you wanted to do. So you can
go ahead. I think that deep focus is it's just so hard to achieve inside of an office. And I've found now that I am working from home that I can get into really deep focus. And I do think that that is going to be one of the interesting outcomes of the time that we're in, interestingly enough.
Yeah. I mean, I said something to somebody the other day. We were having a conversation via LinkedIn, and I said, I am busier being busy. There's so much now that I can do when I'm not intruded. So here's the article that I'm going to write. Now, here's my thing: is I've got to stay focused on that article. But it is fascinating by creating this almost a sacred space. What you can get done in that.
Yes. Can we talk a little bit about the book that you have coming out?
Sure.
So it's due out in August, correct?
Correct. August 4th. Launches August 4th. It's already available on Amazon. You can
fantastic.
You can go get the pre-publication, order it now. I love it if you would. And it's, let me say the name. It's Burnout to Breakthrough. Okay. Building resilience skills to recharge, refuel, and reclaim what matters.
Fabulous. That's a great title. And just for our listeners, we don't want to lose you yet. All of the link to the Amazon pre-buy will be in the link in the bottom of the podcast. So to tee that up.
Great.
What do you think? Think managers have some? Do you think managers have some control over whether their employees burn out? Meaning, is that something they can control?
Well, let me put it this way. I think that the volume that we pass along to people, oftentimes, because particularly if they're very competent, we just give them more and more and more. And because we're competent, we don't want to say, whoa, wait, whoa, hold tight, whoa, time out. This is like way too much. And so I really think there is an obligation for leaders to look at what is the volume I'm asking people to do. And by the way, oftentimes we do not know what it really takes to do that.
When
because
we
see the outcome. Yeah, we don't know the amount of energy that it put to get that. And on the flip side, I also think that it's as the worker, as the team member, I also have an obligation to say, you've asked me to do these 3 things. Which one do you want done first? And what exactly is it supposed to, you're actually asking the leader who's giving it to you, give me some of these boundaries. And if they say, no, you have to do all of it all at once. So, I remember going into a restaurant and it said, good food takes time to prepare. Yours will be ready in a minute. You think about that. That's really what we're saying. You want me to do it that fast? There's a quality thing. I think the amount of meetings that people call, oh my God, useless meetings. So you ask yourself, why do I call this? And I have a dear friend, Bill Jensen, marvelous guy. Go get any of Bill Jensen's book, Jensen. And, he says that you really ask, who needs to be there? What do you want as an outcome? If you go to a meeting, who needs to be there? What do you want as an outcome? And what am I supposed to do at the end of this meeting? If you can't answer those 3 questions, then you have a useless meeting. And many of us have sat in meetings where you sat there and thought, why am I here? You could have given me a summary of this in 3 bullet points and let me work on other things. So you really ask yourself, why do you even call those meetings? The same thing is true of email. Oh my gosh, email. And I'm sure you've been the recipient where it's it's like a roll of toilet paper. It goes on and 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 on, everybody chiming in. If you would have picked up the phone, we could have done this in 10 minutes instead of having all these different, though I got to read what the train is and what goes over here. Stop it. Just stop. Because that contributes also to overwork and burnout.
Any day, I would rather sit in a meeting where I'm not sure what the outcome is than to read an email string with everyone's input with no outcome. I'm more of an in-person person, so I take advantage of being every day over an email, a toilet paper email.
I'm with you, and so I've seen that now is that particularly because we're not in the same space. I said, this is ridiculous. I pick up my phone. Let's talk about this because we can take care of this instead of wasting time, wasting energy. But I could have said, let's talk.
For sure. I just picked up on a word you said, and that leads to the next question. So what are some of the things that managers do that cause team members to lose energy?
When a manager belittles people, unfortunately, we're seeing that a lot right now, where someone who is in a leadership position demeans, talks down to, bullies people, that is inappropriate behavior. And you wonder why the world you even hang on until such time as you can figure out a way to get out of there. So I think part of the way in which managers contribute to that is how they treat people, in less than a respectful manner. I mean, I think everybody deserves respect. So I think that's really one of the things. I think also not acknowledging people for the effort that they're putting out. And there's some real specific ways of acknowledging people's effort. It's not just saying good job. It's telling someone why it was a good job. When I begin to tell you why it's a good job with what you've done, like when I acknowledge you for, sending me the notices that I needed, and you follow up with another phone call, and then I want to make sure that I've got the right date, and we can talk about that. Those 3 things were incredibly, incredibly important and helpful, and I really appreciate that, Allison, that you went to that level of attention to make sure that we were on the call at the same time. So I want to say thank you.
You're welcome.
Because I could have just said, good job, but you don't know what makes it a good job.
Right.
So I'm going to tell you specifically, because now you know that I know, and also what is your guest I value.
Super helpful. I think in thinking that just one more step is I think it totally goes both ways, right? I think that we don't tell the people who support us and that we serve what they do well and exactly specifically what it is about it. And I know that the leaders that I coach crave that too. They're like, am I doing okay? What is it that I'm doing that's helpful? And so for any listener out there, it's a two-way conversation. And I think the more specific you can get about how someone helps you and have them really understand that, that's so powerful, and appreciate them.
I love that. I love that you said it goes both ways.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just in work. I mean, think about this. If you are in a love relationship, I know, I am very blessed that we will be married 40 years, May 18th, wow, which I think is incredible because I'm only 20. I don't know how that happened. But I became really aware. Somebody said something that we constantly acknowledge each other for what someone did. I mean, we don't take it for granted that, he made dinner and he arranged, he put a flower out of the garden and stuck it on the plate. And I get to say, oh, this, or when I do something and he says, oh, I love that. Thank you very much. So it's the please and the thank you and the acknowledgement of the effort that each one of us takes. And I began to realize that that's not all that common in a relationship, a love relationship. So we can take all these things that we apply on a professional level. They can also apply on a personal level.
For sure. Bring it right home where it's most important, right?
Yeah.
I do a lot of coaching and development on the idea of engagement. And I think engagement and energy, in my opinion, are often very synonymous together. And the financial impacts that organizations really suffer from having low energy and low engagement is dramatic. In your research, do you have any metrics that you go by? We have a few that I kind of always target, but I'm just always wondering if my data was accurate to what you think as well.
I can't pull something out of my head.
You can't.
Right.
Okay. So they
that would all sit in a file that I would go and pull out and look at. But let me say something about this notion of engagement and energy. Mm-hmm. So, because I think it's engagement. If you engage a motor, you turn a key, a spark flies, goes to the battery. If it's a good connection, the battery goes and the car moves forward. You engage the motor with a good connection. If it is a bad connection, the battery is drained, there's no energy, and the car goes nowhere. So in order to have an engaged workforce, what you really want to look at is what are the connections that I am making, and are they good connections, or do they drain people's energy? And that's what engagement is. I remember years ago giving some kind of presentation someplace, and it was about engagement. And I knelt down and I looked at the group and I said, "Will you marry me?" And they laughed, and most of them said yes, but a couple said no. I said, that's the whole point. And engagement is an invitation. It says, will you? To which some people will say yes, and some people will say no. So in that engagement, I want to figure out what is it that I can set up in advance that ups the chances. So when I create that connection, someone says, but of course I'll marry you.
That's a great example. And the marriage thing, I get that. You wouldn't just randomly ask someone and not have a heart-to-heart connection to marry you.
Yeah. No, you want to be with me for the rest of your life? No, I don't even know you. Who are you? So that is again, what the communication is. How is it that we are connected? Who are you and who am I? And where is it that we can support each other and grow?
Awesome. In your book, you talk about 4 ways that we create and exhaust energy. So I was hoping that you could share with us what those are. Do you need me to do what I'm asking?
About the 4 skills, adaptability. Yeah. Okay. All right. I do a lot of things with numbers. So to me, these are 4 skills that over time can be developed. Adaptability is the big one. And this is, as we talked about earlier, is where do I find multiple ways of responding to a given situation? It also talks about to be adaptable. It means I'm thinking about what my head is saying. So if I keep saying I have to, then I'm not adaptable. I choose to. When I get into negativity, I'm not being adaptable. I'm stuck. I'm rigid. When I get into pessimism, anxiety, I'm not being adaptable. The other way to be adaptable is not only do I listen to what I say, I make that connection, but how well am I seeking the connections of other people so that I can see what you see. You'll see things that I won't see, and I can learn from that. So adaptability is the first skill. Agility to me is speed coupled with action. It's one thing to think about being resilient. It's another thing to do. And this is a phrase I created a long time ago. Quote me on it, because I will believe it to my dying day. Action is the antidote for anxiety.
100%.
If I can put something into action, even small, then I begin to feel that the energy comes back. Mm-hmm. So agility is speed coupled with wisdom. What are the actions I can put that will give me energy back? So from a personal level, they are things like exercise. Might sound really weird, but so critically important. Sleep. Oh my God, what's sleep? What's interesting is now that we are in this kind of quarantined environment, I'm sleeping more than I ever have. I set the routine so that I actually go to bed at 8:30 and up by 5. So I can go out and run, because I can run where I am right now. It's wide open. There's nobody there. And then have meditation. So what are the actions that you will take? And in times like this, I think another action is to set small goals. Small, not big things, just small. What is one thing, if you did it today, you go, that was a good day. Who is it that I'm going to reach out to, who I know just, they're by themselves. It might be a senior that's in assisted living, whatever. What's something I can do there? So adaptability, agility, laughability. As I mentioned before, laughter is the shortest distance between 2 people. If I can get someone to laugh, you can feel the energy. You can feel the energy. In fact, I don't know if they still do it, at Disney World in Orlando, one of the little theater shows that they had, it was with puppets and whatever, and it was all about a city. And the character that was in it was really wonderful and funny, and people were laughing. And what they were saying was that there was some evil source that was trying to drain the electricity out of the city. And how are we going to get electricity? And the character said, laughter will give us the energy. And I loved it, because the more the audience laughed, the light came up in the theater. And I think, that's really true. Laughter really does this. And so we have adaptability, agility, laughability, and then alignment is, am I lined up with that which is meaningful to me? It's the notion of purpose. And I believe now more than ever, we're looking at ourselves and saying, it's really meaningful to me. How do I make a contribution? I'm hearing the word contribution, Alice, more and more. People want to know that what I do matters. And if I disappeared from Earth tomorrow, somewhere along the line, might be small, but I felt like I've made a contribution. And so in our work, we're looking at now, what's the larger purpose of my work? So we're hearing more and more about a 3-part result. It's profit, the people who are there, and the planet. It's not just enough to have profit. What do I do with the people? What's my contribution to the environment, to the planet, to the community in which I live? And we're seeing actually some marvelous examples of companies that are moving ahead. They're making a statement about here's the contribution I'm going to make to buy the PPE, the personal equipment to keep the first responders safe. Here's another commitment of more money that was given over here, where people are, and organizations are saying, yeah, let's take care of this. I'll give you another example is Patagonia. Patagonia has, which is all the sporting good stuff. It has always, since its founder, a commitment to the environment. Imagine encouraging people, don't go buy a new Patagonia vest. We'll teach you how to fix the one that you have. Well, they have closed their stores for physical distancing, and they're still paying their employees. And they're also looking at ways that we can, give back. You're seeing some of the hotels, like a Marriott, that has taken their empty hotel rooms and now provided those as rooms for, the healthcare workers that maybe can't go home because they have to social distance. Anyway, so you got adaptability, agility, laughability, and alignment. Those are the 4 skills that we can work on every day.
So very, very powerful. And I'd say a lot of the conversations that I have are around the alignment element, but I think the other 3 are so critical. Mm-hmm. Awesome. You gave me several really good quotable things, which I will give you 100% credit for when I post them. There is one other thing that you say, and I'm hoping that you can explain it sort of almost to our wrap up. My cat has meandered back into the room, so if you hear her, I apologize.
Okay, you know what? More and more organizations are letting I don't know about cats, but they're letting their dogs come to work.
Okay, so you say, forget balancing, start sailing.
Oh, okay.
What do you mean by that?
Okay. If I were to ask you to hold up your hands, to show me with your hands what balance looks like, even if people can't see the video right now, I'll tell them what I'm looking at. Show me with your hands, Allison, what does balance look like? Okay. She is putting her hands up as though they are a scale, like a scale of justice. Because the picture in our head when we hear the word balance is that life is equal. Well, that is not going to work. Life has never been equal, never will be equal. And that's because the picture we have in our head with the word balance is looking at equality. When I say sailing, I think of the metaphor of a sailboat. And by the way, if a picture's worth 1,000 words, a metaphor is worth 1,000 pictures. So if you think about sailing, and I grew up in South Florida, if you were in a little one-person sailboat, like we could launch from the beach, stick it in the back of a station wagon, launch it to the beach. If you saw me in my little sailboat, I'd have one hand over on the tiller. I'd have another hand holding onto the sheet to the sail. And if it's a wonderful day in South Florida and the sheet is filled with wind, I'll have my toes hooked under something called the gunnel, which is like a little strip of wood, because my little sailboat is now tilting. You can see it. It's kind of on an angle. So theoretically, would I not look like I was out of balance as I'm tipping over? See, what lets me move forward? Yeah. What allows me to move forward is I'm consciously connected to the most important parts of my boat. If I let go of one of the important parts of that boat, I end up in the water. So the notion of sailing is, how am I consciously connected? Here we go. There's my word connection. There's the word energy. How am I consciously connected to the most important parts of my boat? And all of us have 5 parts. It's just they will look different based upon who we are and what phase of our life. It is our intellectual, emotional, physical, material, and spiritual. Intellectual is the work. Anything that we do that qualifies as work, whether it can be also volunteering for an organization, going back to school, whatever that looks like. Emotional, who are the people I'm connected with? By the way, some of those people we're connected with are huge energy drainers, and we need to throw them overboard, or at least don't visit them very often. So you have the physical is this body. Stay connected with this body. How am I taking care of this? This is the engine that drives the locomotive. And then material, because you and I work to support a material lifestyle. I'm connected to it somehow. So what are the choices? I'm going back to choices that I've made. And do I choose to continue to make that choice? And maybe right now we're seeing some ways in which we want to simplify our life. I want to reduce the expenses that I have, because you know what, in the scheme of things, it's not important for where I am in my life. And the last one is spiritual. And to me, that is the little rudder that's at the bottom of the tiller. And to me, spiritual is staying connected with that part of the world that is greater than all of us, however you define it to be. Organized religion, meditation practice, yoga, whatever it is that allows you to know that you are part of a larger cosmos. And those are the parts of my sailboat as I go through the sailboat. So when the wind shifts, I shift. And you and I both know the wind will constantly shift in our lives, and we're going to have to make course alterations.
That's a beautiful metaphor and very well described. Thank you. I want to make sure that we send any of our listeners to follow you in the way you want to be followed. So where would you like them to connect with you?
Well, let's see. Obviously, I'd love for them to go to the website. There's all kinds of articles that are there. You can sign up for my blog post, which is once a week. My resiliency report comes out. Actually, we say it's published when the mood strikes. The mood strikes about 4 times a year, though I'm writing just a little bit more than that. So there's all kinds of resources that are up there. You can follow me on LinkedIn, just with my name. Come connect with me on LinkedIn. Say that you heard me on the podcast. We can stay connected. Twitter, I'm on Twitter. My Twitter name is McDarling, MacDarling. And of course, I'm also on Facebook. So you can connect with me in any of those ways, any of the ways that I can support and contribute to your happiness, health, well-being. Just don't ask me for money. We're fine.
I love your Twitter name. It's very appropriate. You've been McDarling to have on our podcast today.
Thank you, Allie.
Thank you so much. I very much appreciate your time this afternoon. And please do follow Eileen on her various channels.
Oh, get my books.
And pre-register to get the book on Amazon. That will be in the link below.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure. Whatever you do, be deliberate. And we will see you next time on Deliberate Leaders.
Thank you.